Hello everyone, welcome back to another update on my market research 2022 journey, and this video is a segment of another update which is a portion of a technical analysis. What I have for you today is a bearish market indicator or BMI, which is basically composed of three indicators. The first one is a 50 days moving average followed by a 200 days moving average, and the third is a definition of a bearish market, which is 20% or more percentages lower from a recent high. You can see here there are three lines, green followed by yellow followed by red. The 50 days moving average is the green one, followed by a 200 days moving average, followed by a 20% lower from the recent highs. 50 days moving average, where I can see the general trend of the stock as the closing price deviating away from the 50 days in a positive direction. It tells me that there is strength within the analysis. Followed by a 200 days moving average, which is basically a really good indicator as a baseline for the support line. If the closing price is lower than the 20% lower from the recent high, then it is a bearish signal. Furthermore, for the 20% lower from its recent high, I need to use an interval for the indicator, and I use 253 days, and using from the days here, I subtracted the holidays basically from the year. But the reason why I use 253 days, it's basically a conservative estimate. You don't have to use it, but if you like to change it, you can do that. And as we have mentioned before, the moving averages and the 20% in the bearish market indicator here, the red line, as I call it, the BMI value, it's basically 20%, and it's also covered on the other segment. So we can test if these indicators work. First thing is that I would look for the 50 days moving average. The closing is deviating away from the 50 days moving average in a positive direction, so I would be happy to see that. If I am in the position as it approaches the 50 days moving average, there would be some volatility. Moreover, it does approach the 50 days moving average, which does show a lot of volatility here. And at this point, you might say, yeah, like it functions as a support line, which it is, and it gets tested here, and then it bounces back, and then gets tested here, bounces back, tested here, bounces back, but it does penetrate through the support line here, which it bounces down even more. And you probably can see here the highlight, which is basically if the closing is lower than the 50 days moving average, is going to have a white color highlight. And then it also tests for the 200 days moving average as a baseline, or as we have mentioned before, a support line, but it hasn't touch the 200 days moving average, and then it bounces back, and then it gets tested again, and then the price deviates from the 50 days moving average, which is a positive sign. It gets tested here again, and then tested here again, and then another one, boom, it fell through the 200 days moving average. At this point, I would be worried if I am in the position. So what I would do is basically put a stop limit at the 200 days moving average so that I would maximize my profit. Again, as we know that the recovery is quick, it takes about 10 days, and then it gets tested for the 200 days moving average again here, and then it does recover. We see here another one getting tested again. It's very volatile, as you can see. As soon as it hits the 200 days moving average, we see here there's a lot of volatility. And here, I believe this was back in the 2007, so it does dip lower, boom, 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 whoa. If you look at the 200 days moving average, it is now a resistance line, so it has to penetrate through the resistance line here so that we know that it has successfully recovered. But to do that, the 50 days moving average need to be tested also. In here, it does penetrate through, but it also get tested again here, and then finally it does pass through, but unfortunately it didn't pass here, so boom, it fell down. So what is the red highlight? Well, if it's lower than the 200 and the 50 days moving average, it is going to cover a red highlight. And finally, we see here a purple indicator, a purple highlight. Basically, if the closing is lower than the 200 days moving average, right? We already know that because we have tested here, and which it didn't pass through. So it's lower than the 200 days moving average. So as we have mentioned before, we probably had put a stop limit to minimize any loss. As you see, if it tests for the 200 days moving average, there is a lot of volatility. Again, we see here the closing does penetrate through the 20% below from its recent highs. Therefore, we have a indicator flashing quite a bit too. Boom, look at that. Wow, that is a big dip. And moving on, the 50 days finally recovered the 20%. As you see here, the 50 days moving average getting recovered in here where it intersects with the 200 days moving average. And then we have finally penetrated through the 20% below from its recent high, which is basically a bearish market indicator value. And then the 200 days followed. And then we see here another test, and then it passes through another one. And look at that, 200 days moving average is fairly a good indicator for greater volatility. Another one. So the takeaway message from the indicator is that the 50 days moving average is quite conservative with regard to the 20 days moving average, as it doesn't have too much volatility with respect to the closing price. And the 200 days moving average functions like a baseline for support line. As soon as the price hit the closing price hitting the 200 days moving average, there is a sign of volatility, which is probably not a good sign. And lastly, the 20% below from its recent high, it would be a definition of a bearish market. And then we can hop on to the recent day as we are getting, that is 20% below. You can see here it is getting close to it. If you like to use the indicator, I have published it publicly and you can use it as your own. It's basically, you would hop on to my profile here and you will be able to find the BMI with my channel name, and below it you can add it to your favorite. And then if you go back to your chart, you can basically select it through the indicator and then select the BMI. I hope it is insightful. I'll see you on the next update.